We all want to live better lives. We can be better by applying the life lessons of transformative African leaders. That's what we're going to do in this series. We will place transformative African leaders under the microscope so that we can learn from their substance, their essence, their mistakes too, their imperfections, and their strengths. To start us off is John Pombe Magufuli, Tanzania's fifth president since independence. Hashtag, what would Magufuli do? This hashtag trended on Twitter in the days following President Magufuli's election on 5th November 2015. Today, we're going to look at the 5 years of his transformative presidency and elaborately answer these questions. What did Magufuli do and why? What or who killed him on 17th March 2021? And finally, what can we learn from his life, not just as African nations, but also at an individual level? So strap up, because this is gonna be quite a ride. Magufuli's political journey started in 1995 when he was 36 years old. He was elected as Member of Parliament, representing his home district of Chato. Fast forward 20 years later, it's the twilight months of President Kikwete's reign, and John Pombe Magufuli wasn't exactly the hottest name in the race. That future presidential crown seemed to belong to the likes of Bernard Membe and Edward Lowassa, two heavy hitters swimming in the deep end of the ruling party's political pool. Lowassa had been Prime Minister of Tanzania from 2005 to 2008, while Membe was the long-serving Foreign Affairs Minister from 2007 to 2015. On his part, Magufuli was serving as a minister of the comparatively lower Ministry of Works, Transport and Communications. To many, he was not even on the radar, and if he was, he could barely compete with Lowassa and Membe. They were seen as the epitome of elite politicians, their pockets overflowing and their backsides firmly planted on the shoulders of powerful factions in the party. However, unfolding events knocked out both Lowassa and Membe, leaving Magufuli as the ruling party's torchbearer. His surprise nomination could only be seen as a twist of fate, a plot twist, straight out of a telenovela. In the words of Swahili speakers like myself, ilikuwa riziki yake. It was God ordained. President Magufuli sealed the leakage through which public funds were leaking and redirected resources towards development projects and public services. Unlike most presidents, he didn't just tell people to tighten their belts because the government was broke. Rather, he led by example. He tightened his own presidential belt and the entire government's belt. In your own individual life, remember that your life's example will impact people in your world more than your words. President Magufuli also stopped the expensive Independence Day celebrations within weeks of assuming office in 2015. And that just wasn't PR. He gave orders for the money that had been budgeted for the event to be used in widening part of a highway in Dar es Salaam. In doing this, Magufuli showed Tanzanians that he had saved their tax money and what he had done with that money. Transparency. In your own individual life, embrace transparency because it nurtures trust. In the words of Bwak, the Bantu poet, transparency is the only third wheel that can nourish a relationship instead of stifling it. President Magufuli sought and found more ways of saving public funds. Within 3 months of assuming presidency, his now popular anti-wastage campaign took him to the costly four-wheel drive fuel guzzlers that senior public officials were accustomed to. He banned them. He then ordered that all these four-wheel drive vehicles be sold in a public auction. Proceeds were rechanneled towards other more critical public goods and services. As for senior government officials, Magufuli ordered them to choose between a Probox, a Paso, Platts, Vitz, Due, or any other car that was less than 1400cc. These senior officials included all cabinet ministers, the chief justice, ambassadors, and senior state officials. Let's hear from his own words why he considered fuel guzzlers and high-ranking public servants to be incompatible to build this country like I promised. During campaigns, we must make sacrifices, and that includes sacrificing those unnecessary comforts for the small cars. I have ordered the police to impound any such big cars driven by state officials on the road, and those officials to be prosecuted. We are not here to rob the average Tanzanians, but to make their lives better. In your own individual life, are you incurring unnecessary expenses that don't really add value to your life? Status symbols are vanity pursuits that rob you instead of adding value. In the early days of his presidency, Magufuli put a stop on unnecessary physical meetings and directed public officials to instead hold conference calls. This was long before COVID-19 pandemic necessitated virtual meetings. In essence, it took a pandemic for the world to catch up with Magufuli. In your own individual life, audit your expenses with an open and innovative mind. You might just discover better, cheaper, and more efficient ways of doing some things, even as you cut down on your costs. For me, I realized that I don't have to drink white tea every day. There are so many cheaper, delicious, healthy variations of black tea that I have now integrated into my diet. No, President Magufuli did not stop with virtual meetings. He slashed the fund for the 2016 inauguration of Parliament from $115,000 to $7,000. Why? Why should the poor be sleeping hungry, yet parliamentarians are feasting? He used the rest of the money to buy beds and mattresses for a poorly equipped hospital. The populace was in awe, wondering how much more money the government was actually wasting at the expense of critical public services. In your own individual life, be clear about your priorities and direct your expenses towards those priorities. In his first week in office in November 2015, Magufuli stopped all foreign trips for public servants. In cases of emergency, approval could only be granted by Magufuli himself or the head of civil service. This boosted public funds. On a more permanent level, he directed that all tasks necessitating foreign travel would now be handled by the country's high commissioners and ambassadors abroad. In this regard, he once trimmed a delegation of 50 set to tour the Commonwealth countries to just 4. Even those who had to travel could no longer use first class, as had been the custom. A central bank report in early 2017 revealed that the government had saved $430 million by limiting foreign travel between November 2015 and November 2016. Compare Magufuli's travel philosophy with Kenya's President William Ruto's. By late 2023, within 1 year of becoming president, he had already visited 45 cities in 38 countries. In doing so, he spent 1 in every 5 days outside the country. Just think of the millions of dollars that could have been saved if he had cut this travel into at least a half or even a quarter. That saved money would have boosted Kenya's ailing economy, even if in a small way. Back to Magufuli, by 2019, almost 4 years into his presidency, he was yet to travel outside East Africa. He had only traveled 4 times in 4 years to Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. That's 10 times less than Kenya's President William Ruto's 45 trips in 1 year. In your own individual life, prioritize travel. Again, in the words of Boak the Bantu poet, travel opens your mind and floods you with first-hand knowledge of fellow human beings and the worlds they inhabit, consequently enriching your own world. So travel, but do so affordably. Strap up even tighter as our ride into Magufuli's presidency continues. Our next stop is August 2016. when Magufuli banned export of unprocessed minerals from Tanzania. Why on earth can't we process the minerals right here in Tanzania? He asked mining experts in his government. This approach was in line with these laws of Tanzania. As such, he was simply seeking to implement the law. Mining executives countered lamely that they didn't have sufficient capital for establishing a smelting plant in Tanzania, which implies that they wanted the law of the land to be bent to suit them. Thanks to Magufuli's ban, Acacia Mining, which owned these three mines in northwest Tanzania, stopped export of metallic mineral concentrates from Tanzania. African countries should ban export of unprocessed minerals. It is up to mining companies to mobilize sufficient capital for processing minerals right here in Africa. In 2012, the cabinet of Zambia's then president, Michael Sata, proposed a ban on all raw copper exports. Copper industry lobbyists immediately swung into action. Sadly, the ban was never legislated and implemented. That's why 9 years later, in 2021, Zambia exported 6.3 billion worth of copper. If the ban had been effected, if Zambia had then developed its copper processing capabilities, that 6.3 billion revenue from raw copper would have been pocket change. In 2022, that raw copper helped Glencore, which is one of the leading copper miners in Zambia, to make $255 billion. Compare that with the $6.3 billion that Zambia earned by exporting raw copper the previous year. Clearly, Africa must follow the footsteps of Magufuli and demand local processing of its minerals. It's the smart and profitable thing to do. Our Magufuli journey leads us to this photo. Here, President Magufuli had held a meeting with John Ponton, the chairman of Barrick Gold, the parent company of Acacia Mining, which has substantial gold mining interests in Tanzania. President Magufuli wasn't meeting him to strike a deal that would enrich him individually. Rather, he was meeting him to strike a deal that would enrich the people of Tanzania. This is the new direction that he wanted for his country. After this meeting and numerous others that followed, Barrick Gold agreed to pay Tanzania $300 million and give the government 16% stake in its mines. The Tanzanian people emerged as the winners. Indeed, by pushing the multinational mining companies in Tanzania to the wall, Magufuli was simply seeking a better life for Tanzanians by negotiating the best possible deal for them. In your own individual life, never settle for less. You get what you negotiate for, so seek the best possible deal for yourself. Meanwhile, Sudan is today headed in the opposite direction as compared to Tanzania. 70% of Sudan's gold is smuggled out of the country. Russia, through the Wagner Group, and the United Arab Emirates are the masked beneficiaries of this smuggling. The guy who controls most of Sudan's gold mines, is General Hamdan Dagalo. That guy who leads the Rapid Support Forces, the paramilitary group that is fighting with Sudan's army. Just imagine if he, together with Sudan's army chief, General Al-Burhan, followed the footsteps of President Magufuli and ensured that Sudan's gold benefits all the people of Sudan and not just a few greedy individuals. Imagine too, if Cameroon's President Paul Biya also followed in the footsteps of Magufuli and ensured that Cameroon's gold benefits all the people of Cameroon and not just a few greedy people. If that happened, Sudan and Cameroon would be in a better place. We cannot blame the inexcusable greed of some of our leaders on the West, Russia, and China. We must change direction. Just days after taking the oath of office, Magufuli marched into Dar es Salaam's main referral hospital, expecting a beacon of health and healing. Instead, He was greeted by a scene so utterly disgraceful, his bespectacled face twisted in fury, beds insufficient, equipment broken and useless, patients lying on the floor. Within minutes, the hospital director's incompetent reign ended when Magufuli fired him on the spot. The president subsequently ensured delivery of sufficient funds to the hospital for equipment to be purchased and beds to be fixed. He also unearthed large-scale absenteeism at the hospital and fixed that problem too by ensuring enforcement of human resource policies. His actions announced to the country that his reign would mark the beginning of a new era in healthcare, an era where the sick were cared for and the incompetent held accountable. By taking these steps, the president sent a message to civil servants and the populace that it would no longer be business as usual. He fired a warning shot that all public servants were expected to deliver exemplary service to the public. Indeed, Magufuli's strong leadership was particularly evident in his zero tolerance to incompetency in public servants. Within the first 90 days of his tenure, he fired more than 150 civil servants. Among them were big fish that included senior officials from these government firms. At the end of the day, civil servants are the ones who execute government policy. If they underperform, the citizens suffer. That's why African countries should follow Magufuli's footsteps and ensure that civil servants provide exemplary service. On Law Day, President Magufuli urged the Chief Justice to hasten the establishment of a special high court to swiftly deal with corruption. No jokes. He rightly realized that corruption cannot be decisively tackled through roadside declarations. Within 1 year, 596 corruption cases were before the courts. He then took this anti-corruption fight to his own party, Chama cha Mapinduzi. Another change that President Magufuli effected was public procurement of goods and services. When he took over, inflated costs were the order of the day. Magufuli decreed that any public servant who condoned or facilitated inflated costs would be fired. This restored sanity in public procurement and saved the government millions. In 2015, the year that Magufuli took over the reins of leadership, Tanzania ranked 117th in the Transparency International's 2015 Corruption Index. The following year, Tanzania improved to 116th. 1 year later, it improved even more. In 2020, Tanzania's steady improvement continued when it secured 94th position. The following year, in 2021, Tanzania leaped forward into 87th position, far ahead of Kenya, which was ranked 128th, far ahead of other East African countries. Evidently, Magufuli's leadership dealt corruption a severe blow. Each year of his presidency saw integrity inch forward as corruption decreased. Through Dr. Magufuli's no-nonsense resolution, the Tanzania Revenue Authority drastically increased its monthly revenue from $369 million to $718 million. This increased tax revenue didn't just happen in a vacuum though. It entailed rooting out the corruption that was hamstringing it in the first place. The president had to fire 6 Tanzania Revenue Authority officials, including the Commissioner General, Rashid Bade. 1 year later, he also sacked the tax authority's chairman and dissolved the board. Magufuli was going for the top leadership because when the head is rotten, the entire body becomes dysfunctional. It's no wonder that Tanzania Revenue Authority performed exemplarily well within a short few years. While the other tax authorities across Africa can learn from this, increased tax revenue should always go hand in hand with increased services to the taxpayers. Was President Magufuli a strong leader or a strongman? According to most of the people in Tanzania and Africa as a whole, he was a strong leader. who was standing up for his people and against international bullies. But according to international organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, he was a strongman who was stifling independent journalism, plus activities of NGOs and opposition parties. In July 2016, President Magufuli announced a blanket ban on political activities until 2020. Politicians were restricted to holding activities in their own respective constituencies. Such were the decrees that informed the strongman accusations from both internal and external critics. But for his supporters in Tanzania and across Africa, he was a strong leader. His powerful personality hammered an inefficient government bureaucracy into efficiency. Apart from standing up to international mining companies, apart from rechanneling funds from government opulence to actual development work, he also steamrolled civil servants into efficient service delivery. President Magufuli was a unique transformative leader who deployed his authoritarian tendencies towards the good of the common man. His flaws should not mask his incredible leadership lessons that can make his country and the entire Africa a better place. In your own individual life, make sure that you provide strong leadership for your life. The only one who can transform your life in a positive, powerful way is you. This was the day that Chato, a small town in northern Tanzania, thought it would never see. Yet here it was, 25th March 2021, a little girl sporting short hair and a worn-out floral dress walked by the sad spot without even glancing to the right like everyone else in the queue was doing. I suspect that she couldn't bear to look into the coffin and confirm what she already knew, that President John Joseph Pombe Magufuli was gone forever. Never again would she see his white grin or hear his loud booming voice. However, during his 6 decades on earth, he had used his voice to reach out to the common people and lift them up to a better place, where they could walk in dignity and believe in their immense potential. We must now tap into this potential and make Africa an even better place.